Hello and welcome to part 4 of 6. And no, this didn't come out on Tuesday. Apologies. This will come out on Wednesday. The reason is, well, honestly, the reason is the windows on my sister's office weren't fitting straight, so she couldn't fit the window locks on her windows. So she was worried about leaving her computer and stuff in there. And then she was threatening to sleep down there, and so I kind of got summoned to go and fix everything. And once you're away from work, it's always so much more difficult to get back to the work. So, life happens, interestingly enough. So, that means you get free on Wednesday, though. Which is too bad, is it? So, the Battle of 1915, and this, of course, involves David Beatty. Here's the thing. If the admirals and their staffs had got the fleets they deserved, Rosnetsky would have been in charge of the British battlecruiser force. Or Hyde Parker would have been in charge of the British battlecruiser force. And Beatty would have been in charge of the Russian 2nd Pacific Squadron. Well, their Baltic fleet had been renamed the 2nd Pacific Squadron. There are not enough words to explain, but honestly, if you were to take these 5 events, and really 1916 you can't really spin around. They do quite well for considering their size, and both fleets are handled well. But if you go for the other 4 events, you go through the forces. You cannot say the Dutch squadron was led badly in either battle, because they fought very overwhelming. In one, they fought overwhelming odds. In the other one, they fought a very skilled commander with a very well trained crew. So, despite crews, so you know, if you're talking about the Russian Baltic fleet versus the Kings upon Trawler Hull trawler fleets, well, you cannot say the trawler fleet were handled badly because they behaved themselves most equitably. You can say the Russian fleet really wasn't handling itself well. But in both the case of the French squadron in 1696, that had a general superiority. But other than that, the only times there was a massive, overwhelming preponderance of force on one side or the other was in World War One. And honestly, we say the French squadron had an overwhelming superiority of force of the Dutch. They were, but if Bembo's squadron had turned up a couple of hours earlier, that French squadron would have been wiped out, probably. And so that would have been an overwhelming force. But no, the battlecruiser force versus the first scouting group of the Kaiserlich Marine, Royal Navy's battlecruiser, that is an overwhelming force, especially when you look at the composition of the fleets. But let's start off with HMS Lion. And I like talking about HMS Lion, and I like talking about HMS Tiger, and I like talking about the big cats in generally, because they are pretty ships. They are very, very pretty ships. And they're very capable ships. And yes, they're battle cruisers, and there are lots of things. I have a big, as you know, I tend to call a battle cruiser, and I separate the words. Rather like they have in this text. The battle cruiser is not one word. It is a battle cruiser. It is a form of cruiser, not another battleship. The whole point is, like a cruiser, it was supposed to be able to rely on its speed to get away from anything bigger and scarier than it. But have the firepower to destroy anything small than it. I would say the big cats are definitely on the cruiser end of the spectrum. But they're still pretty darn good looking. Look at that bow. Look at the sleek lines. Look at the number of uptake funnels they have to have. Now, I have to admit, would I prefer to have 15-inch guns to 13.5-inch? Of course. But there just wasn't ready. Would I prefer Tiger to have small tube boilers than large tube boilers? As many were advocating and arguing for in construction. Yes. British constructors, though, and the DNC were a bit conservative on that front. But big cats with small tube boilers, they're going to have far more power. Let's see that. Normal displacement, 26,350 tons. Full load, 29,700 tons. So this is not a light ship. She has 4-inch guns sticking out everywhere, 16 other things. Although, myself, I'm not sure if the forward ones are going to exactly have a fun time in the bad weather, looking at that bow form. 13.5-inch guns, she's carrying 8 of them, 4 turrets. As we all know, I am no fan of a center turret. I think it's a waste of space and of firing arcs. I understand why, because of the lines of the funnels and the saving of weight and all that stuff, but honestly, I think that turret should be in the X position. Super firing above Y, and I think that space in the middle could have been used for other things. They could have shunted things up in that direction. But they didn't. It has 3-inch anti-aircraft guns, 4 3-pounders, some, torpedo tubes. And she's 700 feet overall length, but 660 feet from perpendiculars. Maximum draft 31 feet, 31 2/3 feet. Mean draft 27 2/3 feet. Beam 88.5 feet. Length 675 feet. She is a big ship. Battle cruisers are big ships. They really are. And this is the other problem, but that you start to get an idea after Dreadnought, and some people have this idea that battleships are going to be the big ships. There has been many times in history where cruisers have been as big, if not bigger, than battleships. Especially in terms of length. You look at the age of sail. Yes, there are the mighty first rates, second rates, and third rates. But there are a number of fourth and fifth rates which are as long, sometimes even slightly longer. Especially those which were fourth rates, which have a single are cut down, heavy frigates which have been cut down from something else and have a single gun deck. That can be longer than some of the supposedly the bigger, more powerful ships. Why? Because length. Let's put it this way: longer, thinner, broadly faster. Shorter, fatter, broadly more maneuverable. I say this a lot. That's the rule of thumb. Hull forms can affect things, and yes, you can do all sorts of funny things. And now you've got azimuth thrusters and various other things you can pack in. You can do things with different hull forms. You can do all sorts of cool, jivey stuff. But broadly speaking, if you're looking at something which is a cruiser versus something which is a battle, the battle is going to be shorter and more subtly built, with a lot more subdivision. Take a look at some pictures in the 1920s and 30s of some of the big the county class cruisers versus some of the older battleships from end of the that were still in service. You'll be amazed. Battle of Dogger Bank. It takes place because of context. It is entirely context. There is room 40 cracking German codes often as soon as they're sent. And in fact, if the Germans weren't such gabby getties, as my grandma used to call it, her name was Constance. And I have a feeling she had a Getty in her younger years who she didn't like. Because the amount of things she could rhyme bad with Getty. I don't know. Anyway. They would talk non-stop on the radio at full blast. For all their for all their tactical and strategic brilliance, for all their scientific and engineering wizardry, for all the great things the German people are capable of, for some reason in both world wars, when it comes to their radios, they can't believe that they are actually being hacked and someone's reading their codes, and B, do not understand the concept of turning the dial down so you're not blasting on full power the whole time. And yes, please, if you have specific examples where they have, I accept them. I accept there are specific examples. There are some radio operators who do seem to understand what the dial control is for, but those seem to be so rare as to be notable. Whereas in the Royal Navy and other navies, including Japanese, they understand from a very early on, dial goes that way. And we have lower power. They can still hear me, but the people on the other side of the world can no longer. Hey. Because here's the three things you can do with a radio signal, right? You can, of course, record it and decode it if you can break the encryption. 2, you can triangulate the position it is sent from. That gives you a bearing. You have a couple of sites to pick it up. That gives you multiple bearings, and you can work out where they are. 3, how many signals are being sent? How much traffic is there? For these two things, you do not need to crack or know the enemy code. But if you know where they're transmitting from, and you know how often they're transmitting and how much traffic there is, you can work out a lot from those two things. A lot of traffic means they're probably going to be up to something. Probably something you're not gonna like. Heads up, be on alert. 2, they're over there. Now, yes, to confirm they're over there, you'll want to do some photographic reconnaissance or other things, but, there are limited places a ship can be in a harbour, especially one the size of a battleship or a battlecruiser. So it's not like, you'll have a fake army in part of the UK. It's, it's a port. 2, traffic analysis. Well, there's lots going on, so that suggests they're going to do something. And then it goes quiet. What does that suggest? If your enemy's been making a lot of noise, and suddenly they go quiet, what does it suggest they're doing? It suggests they're doing something, doesn't it? It suggests they've been preparing for something, and then stop, they've gone quiet. They've gone radio silence, they're doing it now. Yay! Ay, caramba. So, the Germans, though, don't seem to understand this. 2 world wars. And actually, having once had a conversation, not that many moons before the COVID War, with someone from Germany who is actually to do with their forces and on their electronic warfare side, had a similar conversation, and I'm still not quite sure they get that point, but I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that they do. I'm hopeful he was pulling my leg. So, that's ring 40, that's on side. The Germans do a raid on Scarborough. They almost get caught. Get scared. And again, of course, they believe their radio traffic cannot be hacked. They believe they are imperfect, that they are completely invulnerable. So, they presume it must be spies. And when they can't find spies, it's gotta be secret trawlers in Dogger Bank. That's what the British are doing. They have secret fishing boats out watching for us in Dogger Bank. Yes. The British are probably going, well, we would if we needed to, but we don't need to. You are loud enough that some people in the UK, when you get close enough to the UK, are picking you up on their civilian radio sets. They think your transmissions are a break in the news. Seriously, you're ruining BBC Radio Classic Hour. We're just about to have jazz on or whatever, and you're ruining it. You're so loud with your transmissions. And by the way, the reports from that are entirely that I have never bothered looking those up. They're just family rumor and history about various things. The German radio transmissions interrupted a family member's radio up near Scarborough. It might not be. Who knows? It might just be family history. A good story to tell at Christmas time. But this all means the British are on alert and the Germans are coming out. And they're heading to Dogger Bank. And in another turn up for the books, this is what happens after Jutland and a few other times as well in history. The Germans decide to send the signal to leave port and are getting ready to leave port. But again, they don't have as good a quality coal as the British do, and they have to prepare and do all sorts of preparations. So the British actually leave port before the Germans do, and the British are reacting to the instructions the Germans have received. It happens. Oh god, it just gets worse. How do you not win this battle in a complete other ambush? I do not know. Anyway, the German plan was to go to Dogger Bank, blow up the trawlers, and stop the British fishing boats coming there. British plan was to go to Dobbelgabank, be there before the Germans, ambush them, crush them, and send them to the bottom of the sea. To do this, the British were sending the 1st Battlecruiser Squadron, the 2nd Battlecruiser Squadron, Harwich Force, another cruiser squadron, some more destroyers. They have all sorts of forces heading there. And it's a clear day with good visibility. And at 7:05 a.m. on the 24th of January, they managed to bump into each other. Ay, caramba. Ay, caramba. And battle takes place. So this is the Royal Navy's force being deployed. We have the 1st Battlecruiser Squadron under Vice Admiral Sir David Beatty, HMS Lion, flagship, HMS Tiger, Captain Henry B. Pelly, and HMS Princess Royal, Captain Osmond de Brock. De Brock, of course, is the gentleman who becomes Beatty's flagship captain when he transfers over to take over the Grand Fleet after Jellicoe leaves there. But yeah, de Brock is not necessarily Beatty's greatest fan. Then there's 2nd Battlecruiser Squadron under Rear Admiral Sir Archibald Moore, HMS New Zealand, Captain Marley Halsey, and HMS Indomitable, Captain Francis W. Kennedy. 1st Light Cruiser Squadron under Commodore William E. Goodenough is sailing in concert with them, and he has HMS Southampton under his direct command because he doesn't fancy having a flag captain. Then he has HMS Nottingham under Captain Charles B. Miller, HMS Birmingham under Captain Arthur A.M. Duff, and HMS Lowestoft under Captain Theobald W.B. Kennedy. Then there is the Harwich Force under Commodore T. Reginald Pritt. Now, T means he's a task force commander and various other things, which means theoretically, he has ability to do independent action. Technically, there's a vice admiral to a rear admiral there, so frankly, he has enough stars above him that he has to deal with them. But if anything happens to those two, then he would be the senior officer who would take charge. Because despite both being commodores, he would outrank Goodenough. He's in HMS Arethusa, again, no flag captain. And he has attached destroyers, Meteor under the Honourable Herbert Mead, Miranda under Barry Domerville, Mentor under Rafe G. Conway, and Milne under Henry R. Clifton Mogg. Mastiff under James L. Forbes, Minus under Ernest H.B. Williams, and Morris under Reginald Henniker Heaton. Now, again, if you look at that flotilla, you have a captain, and you have a couple of commanders who lead various wings, and then you have lieutenant commanders running various things, and another, 3 commanders in there, and 3 lieutenant commanders at the front. But you'll soon see when you get to the 1st destroyer flotilla and the 3rd destroyer flotilla what the actual strength normally looks like.
First destroyer flotilla, Captain Wilmot S. Nicholson in HMS Aurora, flotilla cruiser. Under the command of Captain Nicholson. And there's First Division, led by Commander Brian M. Money. And he's in Akron. And then there's Attack with Lieutenant Commander Cyril Callaghan, Hydra, Lieutenant Commander Roberts, and Ariel, Lieutenant Commander James V. Kreff. Then there's Third Division, Commander Jeffrey Mackworth in Ferret. Then he's in charge of Forrester, which has Lieutenant Commander Montague G.B. Legg, Defender, Lieutenant Commander Cecil H. Sams, and Druid, Lieutenant Commander Roger V. Allison. Fourth Division, that's led by Hornet with Commander Cecil G. Chichester, and that has Tigress, Lieutenant Commander Paul Whitfield, Sandfly, Lieutenant Commander Francis G.C. Coates, and Jackal, Lieutenant Commander John C. Tovey. Yes, that Tovey. Fifth Division, HMS Goshawk leads with Commander Dashwood F. Moore, one of the coolest names that you will ever hear. Dashwood F. Moore. Then there's HMS Phoenix with Lieutenant Commander Michael K. H. Kennedy. Yes, another relative to the other Kennedy. There are a few of them going around here. And HMS Lapwing, Lieutenant Commander Alexander H. G. Then there's Third Destroyer flotilla under command of Captain Francis G. St. John, commanding from HMS Undaunted. And then there's First Division, which is led by HMS Lookout with Commander Arthur B. S. Dutton, HMS Lysander, Lieutenant Commander George W. Taylor, and Landrill, Lieutenant Commander Bruce Lloyd Owen. Second Division, led by Commander George P. England in HMS Laurel, with Liberty, Lieutenant Commander Reginald B.C. Hutchinson. Commander Malcolm L. Goldsmith, soon to be, I think, divisional leader for that division, and Commander England is to be promoted from memory. And then Lucifer, Lieutenant Commander Ralph M. Mack. Third Division, HMS Lafaurie is lead with Commander Graham R. L. Edwards. With Lawford, Lieutenant Commander Arthur A. Scott. Lydiard, Lieutenant Commander George H. Knowles. And Louis, Lieutenant Commander Richard W. Bailey. Then there is the Fourth Division, HMS Legion, with Lieutenant Commander Claude F. Alsop, and HMS Lark, Lieutenant Commander Charles E. Hughes White. Again, from memory, those two tend to get packed onto Letts, and sort of you have 2 3 destroyer divisions rather than 1 4 and 1 2. I think that's how they're working. You will notice that Second Division from First Destroyer Flotilla and Fifth Division from Third Destroyer Flotilla aren't there. That's because they're in maintenance and sorting out things and have lost numbers. And as I said, he'll soon move out 10th Destroyer Flotilla, and again, they'll be formed up to roughly 20 destroyers with a light cruiser in each flotilla. The Royal Navy in World War II would love to have 20 destroyers and in a light cruiser. Then we have the 8th Submarine Flotilla, which has deployed 2 destroyers, Fire Drake and Lurcher, under Lieutenant Commander Alfred B. Watts and Commander Wilfred B. Tompkinson, respectively, to support the submarines HMS E4, Lieutenant Commander E.W. Lair, HMS E7, Lieutenant Commander F. Benamon, HMS E8, Lieutenant Commander F.H. Goodhart, and HMS E11, Lieutenant Commander M.E. Naismith. That is the E11, which will have fun later on in the Dardanelles. Now, that is a mighty force. Let's be honest, that is a fairly capable force. That is 7 light cruisers. That is 5 battle cruisers. I do not want to think how many destroyers that is. That is, let's see, 7 destroyers in the 7 destroyers directly attached to our refuser, and then 4, 8, 12, 15 destroyers with first destroyer flotilla, and 3, 7, 11, 13 destroyers in third flotilla, and 2 more destroyers in eighth. So that's 15 plus 15 plus 7. So that's 37 destroyers and 4 submarines. That's a force which is designed to make someone have a bad day. A very bad day at the office. And then we go for the Kaiserlich Marine. And let's consider what they are. They have, in the battle cruisers, first scouting group. Under Hipper, we have Seydlitz. Under Captain Moritz van Egedy. Molt, Captain ZS Magnus von Letzel. Der Flinger, Captain ZS Ludwig von Ruyter. And Blucher under frigate Captain Alexander Erdmann. And we have second scouting group, which is, well, cruisers, light cruisers. So they have 4 cruisers to take on the Royal Navy, 4 battle cruisers to take on the Royal Navy's 5 battle cruisers. If you consider Blucher charitably calling her a battle cruiser rather than a rather large armored cruiser. We have the second scouting group, which has light cruisers, which is SMS Grandans, SMS Stralsund, SMS Rostock, SMS Kolberg, under Fyodor Pullen, Victor Harder, Johannes Hardog, and Wilhelm Winderman. So that's 4 light cruisers to take on 7 light cruisers. 5th Torpedo Bottom Flotilla. Under Corvette Captain Bernard von dem Nesbeck. We have SMS G12, Hans Loring, 9th Half Flotilla, or Division, as the British would call it. SMS V1, SMS V4, SMS V5, under Wolfert Hoffet, Kurt Hessler, and Wolf von Eichhorn. Which is a pretty cool name, let's be honest. Wolf von Eichhorn. And they're all captain lieutenants. Then the 10th Hull Flotilla, SMS G11, G9, G7, G8, V2. Under Oskar Hennig, Hans Aschnitz, Johannes Weinbeck, Adolf Muller, and Gerhard Boffitter. And the 8th Torpedo Flotilla, SMS S178 under Corvette Captain Paul Hundbuck. And it has the 15th Half Flotilla with Corvette Captain George Webben in charge of V181. Then Hans Hufnagel in charge of V182. Karl August Glasen in charge of V185. And then the 18th Half Flotilla under SMS V30 under Werner Tilson. SMS S33 under Hart Budek. SMS S34 under Otto Adolfsson, and SMS V29 under Eric Steinbeck, and SMS S35, who I can't find who it was on the command of, and I've done some hunting. So, to go off against the Royal Navy's 37 destroyers, you have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 19. 19 destroyers and 4 light cruisers to face off against 37 destroyers, 4 submarines, and 7 light cruisers. Plus, the Royal Navy ships have names. And whilst I know the German crews often gave their ships their own names for them, and nicknames, which good commanders would encourage, it's not going to produce the same esprit de corps. It just won't. You give something a name, you give it a character, you give it a personalization. And I know people are going to point out to me R2-D2 and C-3PO. Yes, those are number and name designations. But they are characters in a movie, and they get to have characters because they're individual androids. Here's the thing. If I say 4472 to you, what does that mean? Numbers. I tell you to say the Flying Scotsman. You immediately know I'm talking about an LNR A3 class Pacific. One of the record holders and one of the most gorgeous looking locomotives that's ever graced this green and blue marble we call Earth. If I say NCC 1701 to you, numbers. I say USS Enterprise, and you're immediately thinking of a beautiful spaceship in Star Trek, or you're thinking of a gorgeous carrier. Doesn't matter either way, you're good. You give something a name, you give it character, you give it a fighting chance. So you'd have had that versus that. That's a superiority of force which, frankly, the British should have been able to use. The Germans don't want to close to close range, because if they do, the light forces and the British ones will sweep past the German light forces and start launching a hailstorm of torpedoes. And also, you have to remember, the German torpedo-bottom flotilla destroyers are more designed around their torpedoes to fire their torpedoes. The British are more designed around destroyers. They have the torpedoes, that's a big part of them, but they also have far more in the way of guns and far more in the way of fitting of guns to fight other destroyers. Because Britain's been more worried about destroying torpedo flotillas than about using torpedo flotillas. Because mostly the people who've been worried about using torpedo flotillas and focusing on that have been the ones who've been the weaker powers trying to outbalance the stronger powers. But the British has been a case of, if we sweep your destroyers aside, your torpedoes aside, boats aside, then we've got enough cruisers to kill you. And of course, the British have 7 light cruisers to the German 4. And the British light cruisers are red-hot town-class ones for them. And our fusers are not exactly bad either as well for World War I standards. So this is a force which on paper should not be sweating this one. Let's consider the commanders. We have Vice Admiral David Forget-Me-Not Beatty, a man who never knowingly passed up an opportunity to have either a dashing photograph or a suitably well-connected but ultimately expendable staff member. And Franz, can I have some more ships von Hipper? Also could be known as Franz, I can't stop talking to everyone, von Hipper. Or Franz, can I please keep send one more radio message? Or Franz, just one more time with the radio. Again, one of the biggest joys of history is the exact options for potentially replacing these two. There are whole suites of admirals who could have done a better job. Hipper is not a bad admiral. I am not going to say that, and I'm not going to sit there and say that Beatty doesn't make some good choices. Actually, in the setting up of this battle, he does make some sensible decisions. He's just so orientated around being the center of attention, he can't for one moment either hand command over to Moore, which would have been sensible, or check his own instructions having given out, and actually has officers who are trained for the jobs he's put them in, not just He's chosen and put them in there because he wants their connections. And Hipper. He is a methodical planner. And as long as he has a plan, he's very good. He's very good when it comes up to coming to plans. He's not very good at coming up with plans on the fly. In fact, honestly, von Spee is the one the Germans need out here for the battlecruiser force. He is the one they need out here. Unfortunately, he's gone down in the Battle of the Falklands. But yeah, the biggest advantage the British had in World War One was that the best vice admiral the Germans had, bar none, in their entire fleet, was the other side of the world and couldn't come back to be given decent ships because the Kaiser was obsessed with his Chinese territories. So here's the fleet action. And we all know the story. The British come tearing in. The British and the Germans open fire at each other. Beatty keeps moving the light forces around him, trying to give them micromanaging them. And at a certain point, Lion is disabled because of the sheer amount of fire coming in from her. Well, no, let's go back to the beginning. Let's start this off properly. So, the Germans and the British fleet come up on show, and Beatty chooses to attack from where's my notes here? There it is. Right. The British choose to attack from astern and to the starboard of the Germans. This is because whilst they can reach 27 knots of speed and they want to close the gun range, this does give them a bit more work to do. But they're doing this because Beatty has chosen this because it's a prevailing wind. It keeps the wind will keep the British ships smoke clear, allowing them a good view of the German ships, while the German gunners were going to be obscured and partially blinded by their funnel and gun smoke blowing towards the British ships. Basically, he's using the Germans' own bad coal against them, because that bad coal produces more smoke in the first place, and now he's using it to cover himself. Lyman opened fire at 08:52 in the morning when it was at the range of 20,000 yards. That's 11 miles or 18 kilometers. A long, long way. And the other British ships commence firing as soon as they come within range. Now, here is where the first mistake has already been put in. Beatty had intended for his rear two ships, New Zealand Indomitable, should both engage Blucher and then work their way up from the back of the line to the front of the line. However, what happened was that the New Zealand and Indomitable did engage Blucher, but Tiger, with Captain Henry Pelly in command of her, thinks that what Beatty was actually signaling was for Tiger and Lion to both engage Seydlitz. This means that Molt is completely unengaged and able to fire on Lion to her heart's content. And also means that Tiger and Lion are not quite sure whose shots are where, which means they keep mistaking each shots for the other, and they're both mucking up each other's aiming. It's cute. The British ships, I can say this: the British ships managed to remain relatively intact for the next hour and 30 minutes of the engagement till about 20 past 10. However, there is a very interesting experience for the Germans in that Seydlitz gets hit quite badly, and the fire was spread. It goes into the turret barbette, causes ammunition fire in the working chamber, all sorts of things, and it's heading towards the magazines. And the executive officer who's in charge of damage control floods the magazine. If this hadn't happened, it would have destroyed the ship. And it's actually lessons from this which do lead to some changes in the German citizens. At about 10:30, Blucher is hit by a shell from Princess Royal. Which caused ammunition fire and boiler room damage, and Blucher has to reduce speed to 17 knots. Now, in a battle where fleets are engaging each other at 27 knots, or roughly that, this is absurd. But she's not the only one who should be damaged. Lion has also had received damage and is down to 15 knots, having been hit 14 times. At this point, signals start to go awry. Beatty orders Indomitable, which he considers his slowest ship, to intercept Blucher. I'm not sure if Indomitable really is the slowest ship at this point. I would argue that Lion, which is his flagship, which can only do 15 fricking knots, is probably the slowest ship. And considering the range of its guns and the distance they're at, could probably still have intercepted Blucher, which can manage a top speed of 17 knots. And if they can't, then there's a problem going on. Lion's electric generators were out of action, so he can no longer send radio signals, and so BT can only use a signal using flag hoists. And he manages to fly 2 signals at the same time. One, after thinking he's seen a submarine, which we know wasn't there, possibly could have been one of his own submarine periscopes, orders a 90-degree turn to port to avoid the submarine ambush. Might have been, some people consider, a torpedo launched 15 minutes earlier by a German destroyer called German destroyer V5. The light forces have been wandering around trying to get involved, but Beatty's been managing to nix his own forces getting involved, and the Germans have been steadily causing their own problem as well. Basically, neither senior officer should have too many destroyers on their command. They obviously don't know how to use them. First, Beatty ordered a 90-degree turn to port, then realizing that would open the range too much, he changes it to course northeast to limit the turn to 45 degrees, and adds engage enemy's rear to his target, sort of to tell them what to do. Unfortunately, he'd forgotten at this point that the ship that was immediately to 45 degrees was the Blucher. And the engaging enemy's rear was taken to mean engage the ship to 45 degrees. Because both signals are being flown at once. And that's what it means. You fly one after the other. Go 45 degrees, and then up, and then take it down, and then after a certain amount of time, 90 seconds, 2 minutes if you really want. It's a long-range communications, as I was saying in some of those brew ships. And then you fly the next one. You do not fly the 2 signals simultaneously. Otherwise, they are one signal. If they are flown together, they are one signal. I.e., England expects every man to do his duty. It's one signal. Not England then expects you see all those flags flying, you think it's one signal. It's the same with this. And we're not going to get into poor Beatty's officer because, frankly, he shouldn't have been there. He shouldn't have been the flag officer. He should have been getting trained, getting qualified, and Beatty should have had a decent staff and should actually have chosen a decent staff. It's on the Admiral. The buck stops with the Admiral for this one. Anyway, they managed to sink the Blucher. They all turn up and poor Blucher gets blasted away. And here's the thing, the really fun thing. When they're talking about the results of the battle, there's a real difference in the analysis. The Germans focus on going, oh, we need to upgrade our accuracy. We need to be able to hit the enemy harbour. And, to be honest, they got more hits as well. Beatty and his staff officers can decide that what they need to do is fire faster, because if you've got a 3-4% hit rate, what you should do is double your number of your speed of firing, because that will surely increase your number of spare shells. Here's the thing, if you're getting a 3 or 4% hit rate, and I'm not saying it's that bad, but it really wasn't that great, perhaps you need to take longer to aim. So maybe slow down the pace of firing. You might actually get more hits. As we can see, Blucher's captain was given a full proper burial with full honours, and the filming of the sinking it was used to raise money. Blucher was a fine ship which shouldn't have been there. But the Bluchers do tend to be unlucky ships in German service. They do. They really do. Oh, and in a random little thing for you all, thought you might enjoy this. This is, and I'll do a summary of the whole thing, I think. But I was asked the other day what the railway is going to look like in my office when I finished it, and this is my plan. In N-gauge, from memory, each dose is roughly 10 centimeter squares. Because it should be 2, 4, 6. Yeah. Those are 10 centimeter squares. I've given myself 225 centimeters. I've got 228, but I've given myself 225 to fit it in, so I've got plenty of space in the plan. And as you can see, it's a nice extended loop. It's going to be a raised track, so the track at the back and coming in across the line, of course, is going to be raised up. So it's actually only 2 circuits, but it's done in a sort of internal spiral sort of way, so it should be a nice line. And I've got a cut round track, a little goods yard, a little bit able to do a little bit of shunting, turntable, a little bit of train storage. Nothing too fancy. And 2 sets of level crossings. Planning on having a little road at the back going under the railway. So there'll be a road bridge opposite that level crossing the road will go into, and road here. And actually, it won't be that big in that all these bits is going all the way down to. It's just going to be a little bit extra. It's not going to be that wide. It's going to be 40 or so centimeters wide, that bit at the end. So it's going to have a bit of space either side, but it's going to be that. I don't know. Hope you like that. So let's do what we normally do. Flick back through and then do a summary. So the Battle of Dogger Bank, 1915. It's a good battle. It's an interesting battle. It's certainly one which I like to talk about, and I hope you've enjoyed me talking about. But it's also one of those battles which is a what-if battle. There is so much potential. There's so many things it could have happened. So many different options which could have been the case that you honestly start to wonder why. Any battle is a loss of life. It's often one of those things that you get chucked at you as a historian who looks at war, naval historian, military historian, whatever. Oh, you must love war. You must love it. Glory in the killing. You don't. In fact, one of the reasons you study it often is because you want to find out ways to prevent that. And especially people like me who do semi-specialize in deterrence and why it fails. In 1915, the Battle of Dogger Bank is a battle which happens at its first point because the Germans do not understand the realities of their radio communication and the effect it has. So they have that misanalysis. So it's then leading into an ambush because that same factor is working against them. Again, the British aren't going to get the signal because they're at Dogger Bank, from trawlers at Dogger Bank, that they are at Dogger Bank. No, the British are going to get the signal that they're coming from their own radio transmissions. So they're going into an ambush. And the British, because they're doing an ambush, should actually have managed to implement an ambush. They should have actually got one there. They have the ships. They have the light forces. If you want to engage more closely, you engage more closely with everything. If you've got your battle cruisers already hammering them, then tell the destroyers to go for the kill. Yes, they've got light guns, but the Germans can't deal with their light guns and all their destroyers overrunning their destroyers if your battle cruisers are also hammering in on them. Don't treat it. Beatty treats it as almost a sectional battle, like my battle cruisers will engage, and I will only call on destroyers if I need to cover the battle cruisers. Who cares? Wipe out the whole force! You want to be the new Nelson? Be the new Nelson. Wipe it all out. And you've got Hipper. Hipper honestly could have won that battle against Beatty because of Beatty. A little bit more aggressive. Could have done it. It doesn't. So that means that, frankly, the loss of life with Blucher, the loss of life of all the ships that are lost, all the crews that are wounded, all the injured, all the people who are killed, shouldn't have happened. So, there you go. The Battle of Dogger Bank, 1915. The battle that shouldn't have happened. And that was parts 4 of 6. In part 5 and part 6, I'll probably have a different t-shirt. I hope you enjoyed it, and thank you for watching. Take care.